Hello, welcome, welcome. People are starting to come in. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started here in just a minute. I'm going to give it a minute or so to let everyone in, and then we are going to take off. I see some familiar names here. Welcome back. Hi, good evening, good evening. It's almost evening, 4:30. Welcome. As you're coming in, if you would like to use the chat to introduce yourself, let us know where you're coming from. Feel free to do so. The chat is open. I'm going to go ahead and, hi, Maureen. I'm going to go ahead and put the link to the slides in the chat if you want to use them. If not, no need to. You can just watch your screen, or if you want to look back at them later, you absolutely can. Hello, Antonio, San Antonio, Texas. Welcome. Huntsville, Alabama. I'm coming to you from about 30 miles southeast of Chicago. And I believe, Eric, are you from Philly?
I'm in the Philly area, yep.
Nice, nice, awesome. Oh, Silly Valley. Oh, second year teaching CSP. Enjoying the CT shenanigans this year. And CSA. Oh, for over a decade. Woo! Very nice. You are officially an expert now. All right. As you come in, keep putting your introductions in the chat for us so we can learn a bit about you and see where you are from. It's nice to see some new faces here as well, or some new names, I should say. Can't really see the faces, but definitely new names and some previous names. All right, while you are doing that, I'm just going to quickly introduce myself and then we'll get started. So my name is Robin Leslie and I am a PD specialist with CodeHS. I was a high school teacher for 15 years up here in Northwest Indiana. And I started off as a business teacher and then ventured over to teaching computer science. I also used CodeHS in my classroom and actually used most of CodeHS to teach myself computer science before I taught it to my students. And now, of course, I've come full circle and I work for CodeHS because I love it so much. And I do want to introduce you to one of our teacher trainers, Eric Magnus. He is going to be your host today. He was actually in our first teacher trainer cohort back in 2020, and he is a rock star presenter. I will also let you know, we are recording this and I can send you the recording and the slides when we are done. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll be watching the chat, but we also have Q&A open as well. So if you have a question that you don't want to post in the chat, feel free to type that question in the Q&A and I will get that answered for you. So let's say hello to Eric.
Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Magnus. Thanks for coming out today. And I saw someone in the chat say CT shenanigans. And indeed, that is exactly how I feel this spring, indeed all year, trying to grasp at information to how to prepare my students. It's been quite the year doing this. So I hope that we can give a little clarity, as much as is available right now for us, as we're going through this process. So we're going to run through some slides talking about so I'm Eric Magnus. I'm just out of Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, and I'm in the suburbs out there. And today we're going to go over a little bit about me, and then we'll go through the curriculum that CodeHS has for us. And after we go through that curriculum and the AP-CSP curriculum, I want to talk about some supplemental materials that are available in CodeHS that can help us prepare our students for this create task. Specifically, I'm going to look at a supplement called Testing 123, which I fell into about 4 years ago. And I really like it as an initial step to prepare my students for the create task. And then I'm going to show you what I've done to tweak it a little bit so it gets them even further along in the create task preparation. And then at the very end, we're going to reflect on kind of what we've seen and what may be coming in these next couple weeks and months before the big exam. So yeah, here we go. If you have any questions, you can put them in chat or in the Q&A for us. If you are new to us at CodeHS and you would like to have an account, please join us. I am a huge fan of CodeHS. When I started teaching CS a few years ago, I was led to CodeHS and its warm embrace to help me out as I was just getting my feet under me. And it's been awesome all this time. So you can join us here. So a little about me, I have been teaching over 25 years now. And when I graduated from college, I was a classics major. And from there, with my Greek and Latin background, I taught Latin for 20 years in a private school and at Villa Maria Academy, which is just west of Philly. And about 6 years ago now, I was teaching the class and a student asked a question. And from across the room, before she finished her question, I just said, page 32, third line, fourth word. And it was exactly at that moment I went, I've been doing this too long. I have read the Aeneid 20 times. Well, by that time, it was probably 22 times. And I was just done. So I switched over, dramatic switch over to CS, and it has been wonderful. I just jumped in. I've been a reader for a few years now, and that is awesome. If you get a chance to become a CSP reader or CSA reader, highly recommend it. In my spare time, I canoe and I kayak, and that's that picture there. It's a boat I restored during the throes of COVID, so I do a lot of that. CodeHS. If you're new to CodeHS, CodeHS is a comprehensive platform for teaching computer science. It has an incredible amount of courses that you can access. Every time I pick a course to teach, I am humbled by the number of courses I'm not teaching when it comes to CodeHS. There's so many wonderful things. I use CodeHS on the AP level. I use it at the introductory level. And I even use it in my tech club and a esports club. So I use it as much as I possibly can. This software makes it so you can see what students are doing almost in real time. You can give the history, you can give feedback through the conversation tab. When they submit stuff, you see it, the little colored bubbles from nothing to yellow to light green to dark green, maybe a pink if you got to throw a pink color in there every once in a while. I use the grader constantly. I love my little fast grader and just to see where the students are going. So I am a big fan of CodeHS and all it has to offer. What we're going to look at today is the curriculum that we can get from CodeHS. I have chosen CodeHS from the CSP teaching because I think its alignment with the exam is really, really strong. I think what it emphasizes matches what the exam emphasizes. I love how it's organized and logical. It's great for my students so they can stay on task and on goal at all times. The flow where we code for a bit, we may take a step out, look at the internet, come back and code some more. It leads us straight up into the performance task and a perfect flow for me to prepare for the exam. My favorite resource in CodeHS is the Docs tab. I tell my students about that early and often. If they ever have a question for me, especially during the create task, they say, I don't know what's going on. I say, click on that Docs tab. Go find it. The answer is there. Just dig, find it there. The ease of grading is great about it with the fast grade tab. I teach in an all-girls school, and I love the fact that when my students are watching these videos, that they are hearing female voices in CS talk to them. And I think that's really, really good for my students. The videos are really excellent through and through. The assignments tab gives very good instructions. I find that if a student ever goes astray, it's just because they didn't read the instructions correctly. And we just guide them back and say, let's look here again. On the teacher side of things, I love my solutions, makes my life much easier. I let my students go basically at their own pace with a few little limiters. And so if I'm jumping from lesson to lesson, it can be across many different lessons. If I can just glance at that solution before I go help them out, it makes my life way easier. And then today, actually, we're going to dive into the supplemental material options in CodeHS. So one of the supplemental materials, and one that I absolutely love this year, is the Create Performance Task effective 2023-2024. So our friends at CodeHS have put into one spot all the information that the students or the teacher will need for successful completion of this performance task. They've given the overview, which is gleaned straight from the AP website, and guidelines, which are made very clear from the AP website and supplemented for us here. Then we have guidelines here in 39.3 about what the written portion is going to look like, which is kind of sort of anybody's guess right now, but we're trying our best. And then in 39.5, they have all the bubbles set up for them to complete their performance task, from their coding to their video to their personalized project reference. And I will show this slide again because I think it is really important and excellent tool for the student and the teacher. So this year, the Create Performance task has changed, not insignificantly. It is 30% of the total score of the exam, and the students are responsible for writing a program and then being able to write on their test about their program. We are required to give them at least 9 hours in class to do this. Make sure you do it. That's down from 12 in previous years. And it's going to be scored, I would say, largely similar to how it's been scored in the past. Well, I say that, but I also feel like it's very, very different. It's definitely a different rubric, but they're still going to look at the program code and video. And then instead of pre-written responses that are turned in, they will be writing these responses on the day of the test, adding extra time to the length of the test. There are 3 components we have. One's going to be the program code. Students can work on that together. I discourage that strongly. Then they're going to make a video of their program running. That needs to be done completely independently. And new this year is the personalized project reference. This is the students taking screenshots or snippets of their code, 4 snippets of their code, and placing them into 4 prepared boxes to be submitted to AP. They will have access to these 4 snippets of code to help them while they're writing their written responses during the AP test. Notice it gives very specific instructions as to what you should be included, your procedure and your list. And then the other 2 things would be your call to your procedure and the use of the list. And it also specifically says no comments, no comments, no comments. It says that throughout the instructions of AP, to the degree that it's going to tell teachers that we are supposed to go through and make sure those comments aren't there before final submittal. So this component A, program code requirements. If you've been doing this in the past, I will say I think this looks strongly similar to the expectations from last year. The students need to have some type of input, whether it's a user, a device, a data stream, or a file. They must have a list and use that list. And then they must have a standalone procedure that's going to have a name, a return type, and parameters, and an algorithm that's going to have sequencing, selection, and iteration that's in that procedure. Selection is if else, iteration is a for loop or a while loop, and sequencing is going to be showing that the code must run in a particular order. This procedure must be called, and we need to have some type of output. I think students might be tempted to ask you at some point, is my code right? And of course, we can't say yes and we can't say no. It is their job to do it independently. But we can redirect them to these very clear directions and say, check your code. Does it fulfill these basic requirements? And just redirect them to this. So here is the AP submission requirements and what it would look like if they were to go to the AP website, and the requirements are the same here. Our second requirement, component B, is there must be a video that's showing input, the program functioning, and an output. An input, the function, and the output. And they'll most likely be required in the written response to talk somewhat about elements of that or all of them. What is the input? How do we see your input? Who inputs? What is the output? How would your output change? Things like that. In their video, we shouldn't be able to hear the student. We shouldn't be able to see students. We should see nothing in the background. We shouldn't be able to see their name. In CodeHS, the name of the student is in the top right corner of the screen. So depending on how they're recording, just vigilantly have them make sure that name isn't there. One possibility is to have them change their name briefly into a blank, which they can go and edit their name if they need to. This video must be one of these limited file formats, which are generous and pretty easy to do. Less than a minute. I always have a student who wants to, please, can I do more than a minute? But less than a minute. And if you keep it less than a minute, it will be smaller than the 30 megabytes. I've also found that if a student tried to turn in something bigger than 30 megabytes, that AP just rejects it. They can't even turn it in. So if a student's curious as why is it not going in, it's either going to be a format issue or a file size issue, and they can record it. And here's what it looks like at AP and the requirements there with their little checklist. And it's the same requirements from the past, that we need to see their video running with an input, the function, and the output. So here we come with the big newness, the personalized project reference. Instead of having a written response that they write up and submit, this year the writing is taking place during the exam day in an added hour. So they can write during the test. They're going to put together, the students are going to put together a personalized project reference so that during the exam, this will be handed to them and they can see it to help them when they are answering the questions. There are two portions of the personalized project reference. One is the procedure section. The procedure section has a procedure I and a procedure II. I find my students get a little confused with the I and II nomenclature. But the first one, procedure I, asks for a student-developed procedure that has a name, a return type, parameters, and sequencing, selection, and iteration. This will be a fairly large chunk of code, but notice it's referring to only that one procedure. I discourage my students from trying to just put all their code in, which they are tempted to do, but it needs to be just that procedure. In II, they are going to have a call to that procedure. And that could be just one line. And that's all they need. And many of them have anxiety about just one line. Can I not write more? Can I not add something? But no, all you need is the one line. And then the second part of our personalized project reference is going to be using the list. And again, two different program code segments. One's going to be how is data been stored in a list. And again, this could be just one line if you have a static list. It may be multiple lines if you're building a list by user input or something like that. And then in the second part is where is that list being used? Again, that might be just one line of code where it's being used, or it could be used on multiple locations. And if they're tight, you can just bring in all that code together. I have been stressing the importance of the PPR to my students over and over and over again, because I say, this is what you're going to be using on the exam to answer these questions. And so make sure your PPR is really good and has exactly what you are told to have, or you're going to struggle or maybe be completely unable to answer the questions come exam day. We practice that before the actual create task on several occasions. I make them review it and look at it over and over and over again. So here's what it's going to look like on AP with the instructions and the squares where they're going to be able to copy and paste their code. For those of you who've done this in the past, this is reminiscent of what we've had in the past. It's just instead of being inside the written response, it is its standalone element. As far as that's concerned, that makes it a little bit easier, I think. Plagiarism. Don't plagiarize. Tell them don't to plagiarize. They get a 0 if they plagiarize. They hurt their classmates if they're stealing from their classmates. I've seen the letter teachers get when there's plagiarism. It's no fun. So I really hit this one hard and heavy throughout the year. This is the big change. Why we're changing everything is because of generative AI. I would say that AP has a very generous option for AI, that it can be used in a supplementary way. I tell my students it's very dangerous to start using it supplementary because you can kind of get addicted. I ran several generative AIs to see what they would produce for the AP. I was pleased to find out that what they created is just at this point is something a student would not create. So it's very clear if the student has used generative AI. I used a Gemini and ChatGPT, and what it produced was correct and beautiful, just way beyond what any of my students would ever have produced. So limit to forbid generative AI use. In the final submission, the students are going to be submitting the video and the PPR by themselves. They cannot have any comments on it. If they have a comment on it, boom, 0. So make them delete those comments. They have to say, they have to affirm that they have done their own work. And I want to point out here where it says submitted as final. If you haven't been in AP before, what happens is the students will put their work in there and they will hit the submit button. At that point, it stores it. And then there's a second time they have to click a submit as final button to say, I really, really mean it. So it's a 2-step process. When you look at your own create task portion, from your perspective, you can see whether the students have done that or not. But we have to make sure they click both times to really get it all the way in there so they can actually use it on the test day, that PPR. Okay, so supplemental materials. I apologize. I am about to run through this. At the bottom of your course, you can scroll down there and search for content, and there is lots of supplemental material, AP test prep, coding extensions, playlists and problem banks that other teachers have made stuff for you to use. I've made a bunch of stuff myself. You can't see them on this one right here. Extra tests for the students to take. Enrichment. If you got a kid that's super fast or bored or something like that, there's great enrichment opportunities. And then if you look in the box on the right, there's practice PT, the shopping list, and practice PT testing 1, 2, 3. I make my students do both of those as if I walk them through them, and then we do one for real so they can do them before the big show of their create task that's for real. And today I'm going to go through testing 1, 2, 3 and show you how I use that. In testing 1, 2, 3, it says right here, the 4th prompt of the create performance task requires you to describe 2 calls. So this is no longer the 4th prompt. This would be the PPR procedure. Those 2 elements in the PPR procedure is what this covers right here. So I will have all my students come here with me, and then we do this together as a class. And what we do is we write a program to test a DNA string to find out whether or not someone is infected. And we go and check. We use this index of, which is great, which checks and sees, is this AATCGGAT in the sequence or not? And we teach them the index of method, and we pass the parameter, and they're either infected or they're not. This is a great first step towards a performance task because we have a parameter, We have selection in our if-else statement. We have our procedure right here, and we have our call to our procedure. So many of the elements that we need for the create performance task are already right here. And it's super easy to write. You can see how short this code is. It just takes moments as a class to get through this and create fun code. And we all find out whether we're infected or not. And it's leading us right to a model for the create task. What it is missing is the mandatory iteration and list. But I think it's very easy and natural to add those two items to this code. So here we go. Here's our first extension. Instead of having the user, let me go back up one moment. Instead of using the read line, asking the person to enter one item and that one item gets passed down here, all we can need to do is create a list, and it already has all of our information in the list. That list is then passed down to our for loop. And so we've added our list and our iteration. And now all of a sudden, this very brief code fulfills all the requirements of the create performance task, fulfills all the requirements that it needs. And so they can see it, they have a model, they've helped create it, they've tweaked it, they've played around with it. At this point, I actually had a third day. I'm in block scheduling, so I'll be in my third day of this. And I add one more element, and that is for the list, I make a loop and a half. I find my students struggle with the concept of the loop and a half and miss some questions on the exam because of that. And so I reinsert it here, taking it one more step, adding the loop and a half, adding a little bit of user interface to make it feel more lively to them. And we bring this in. The bottom doesn't change, but we just tweak this up here. So that's what I do. So I take this testing 1, 2, 3, and we build on it first with the parameter and selection. Then we add our iteration and our list, and poof, we have a full example of exactly what a create performance task could look like for them. And we have some scaffolding going on as they are preparing themselves for the create task. After we finish the create task, we then dive deep. We talk about the writing they're going to have to do on the exam. I give them sample questions, the ones that are in CodeHS. There's 8 right there that we use. And I make them write and practice writing and carefully read what's the question asking, what's your answer going to be. I make them create a PPR from here. I make them create a video. So at the end of the testing 1, 2, 3, they will have turned into me all 3 elements that would be required by the AP just for practice: the video, the PPR, and the code. The video, the PPR, and the code. And we practice all through that, so it's not a surprise going on. So not really sure exactly the scoring rubric, but what I do make them do is go back and look at the guidelines to say, have you followed the guidelines for your code? Have you followed the guidelines for your video? Have you followed the guidelines for your PPR? Go grade yourself. Check this in. I build in a template. I want to be very clear here. I don't give them a fill-in template. I just take what we saw from AP with the big blue boxes and the prompt questions, and I just put that in a Google Doc so they can get used to copying and pasting into this. We also look at exam models. The AP Resource Hub, the AP CSP Resource Hub in CodeHS has some great samples for us to look at. What's good, what's bad, how do questions look, what does a good response look like, what's a good video look like. We judge theirs too, because there's a sample A and a sample B, and we grade sample A and we grade sample B so we can see what are other people doing. The blue here in the middle, I hope this is helpful. I've been a reader. This will be my 7th year reading now. And there are some pitfalls that students fall into. We don't know exactly what the questions will be this year, but supposing they are similar to the past, I want to point out a few that hopefully you can direct your students away from. Many, many students confuse the idea of the purpose of code and the function of code. The purpose and the function. The purpose is, why does it do what it does? And the function is, how does it do what it does? And often I was looking at some of the questions that people think we might be having and some proposed ones. I try to tell my students, are they asking about function or are they talking about purpose? Because they're saying function, only talk about the how. They're talking about purpose, talk about the why. We have to really divide those two. Students pretend like those are synonyms and they are not. Another one, why the program code could not be written in this way. Many students say, my code could only be written this way. And that's just not true. There's many other ways to write the code. If you get rid of a list, you can use variables, right? So if you get rid of a for loop, we can figure out a way to put a while loop in. So I would encourage you, when they're preparing for this, the writing on the test and they're preparing sample questions, to know, we can't tell them, we can prep them in the warm-up stuff, shopping list and testing 1, 2, 3, but they need to understand when they look at code, oh, there's not one monolithic way to write this. I could have written it somehow differently. Contributes to the overall functionality of the program. A lot of students will talk about how the procedure itself works, and they will not discuss how it takes in information from the rest of the program or how it sends information back out. They only talk about the procedure itself and not how it relates to the rest of the program. And that's an easy pitfall we've got to help them avoid. And finally, there's many references throughout the instructions to sequencing, selection, and iteration. That will need to be in their PPR 1, and it will be in their code. There'll probably be questions specifically about it. And sequencing is the code goes in order. We must declare a variable before we access that variable. Selection is having an if-else statement. And a iteration is a for loop or a while loop, though while loops can make those infinite things that are very painful. So we have to be careful. And it does say in the instructions that we have to have a parameter. So we got to make sure we're following each of those elements, because if we miss one, it's just so easy for the grader to say, you don't get a point because it's not there. It's not complete. So those are things to look at. So then this is the AP CSP Resource Hub. It is really terrific. It has the courses, it has examples, these tutorials here. Please avail yourself of them. You just type into Google, APCSP CodeHS Resource Hub. This will be your first hit. Has everything right here for you. It really is a great way to dig deep, give supplemental information, help us know where we are and are we following the right path. As soon as I finished testing 1, 2, 3, I moved to shopping list. Testing 1, 2, 3, we do as a class. Shopping list, they are required to do alone. They write the code alone, they record alone, they write their PPR alone, and they do practice written responses alone. And then they turn that all into me, and I grade it with no mercy, because I want them to see where they need to improve. Then we start practicing multiple choice questions all over the place. The questions of the day by CodeHS are great. They also have supplemental multiple choice questions. There's, of course, AP Classroom for us. Then we get into the performance task. My students, as of yesterday, Tuesday, we have finished our performance task. We have not hit submit final, but they have done their 9 required hours in my class, which we had to do because I'm about to go on a 2-week spring break. So it kind of messy there. Then we will review past materials. 2 things I will emphasize. My students need help with binary and hexadecimal. They have forgotten it all at this point. And Boolean. We need help understanding Boolean. So I will hit those 2 hard. I mentioned the AP CSP questions of the day. Those are great. Kids can kind of see how they're doing, get frustrated. I don't grade those. I say just the more questions you practice doing, the more familiar you are with the test. So when you get to the test, you aren't surprised about how they're trying to trick you with twisting a word a little bit, adding a not in there, leading you down a primrose path, and then switching it up the last second. I try to make them practice hundreds and hundreds of MCQs before the test actually hits. And then we've got the big day. I'm circling back to this slide that we saw earlier. And this is the slide that CodeHS created this year for us that is invaluable. It is great for the students. It puts everything we need in one place for us to go and see what is this performance task? What is AP even asking of me? What are the guidelines? What do I have to do to successfully complete this? 39.3 here, questions. I will go over those in just a moment. Then planning out your project and then completing the project. It is really so helpful to have this all in one place. It helps me watch their progress. I do 39.1, 2, 3, and 4. Sorry, 1, 2, and 3. We do those all together as a class because I want to give them the instructions over and over and over again. And then they are on their own for 39.4 and 39.5. Here, these are the categories that AP has presented to us in the course and exam description that are fair game for questions they could ask on the exam. I am still getting a feel for this and how to best prepare my students for this, but there's a lot of material. So this is category 1. What's the purpose? Explain how it functions. Remember that purpose versus function. What are the inputs to the program? What are the outputs? These generally want very specific answers, not just generic. I put some inputs in, name it. What is the development process? Testing, it uses that word a lot. How is the user going to use it? How would they benefit from it? And then documentation. What would be the commenting you could make? What would you type in to help people? A little ironic here because they're not allowed to have any comments at all when they turn in their PPR, but they're going to ask about potential commenting. And then here's an example prompt. I make my students practice this example prompt, and this is very similar to questions we've seen in the past during the write-up. But that's not it. Then we have category 2. Category 2 is going to talk about their procedure. How does the procedure function? Relational operators and logical operators. This is a big one. My students struggle with this. I will hit this one hard, hard, hard. Now, I can't talk about any of this stuff with relation to their code that they're turning into AP. That clearly is out of bounds. So when I talk about these question categories, I am going to be talking about them with respect to shopping list and testing 1, 2, 3. Those are fair. Those are preparatory. We can talk about all we want there. But when it comes to the code they have written, and if they say to me, how do I talk about the conditional statements in the code I'm writing for AP? I'm going to just say, I'm sorry, we can talk about anything else, but we cannot talk about your code. Conditional statements. What triggers a conditional statement? What would make it so something would run or not run? Iteration. Where's your for loop? Where is your while loop? Make sure when they're talking about the iteration, it's going to say the first condition or the first iteration. So they need to talk about that specific element while they're doing it. And then here, so these are more questions. Then here, errors in testing. What would be an error? How could you make an error? How would you correct an error? So this would be the third set of written response that they would have. And then finally, the fourth set, lists. What's the purpose of a list? How does it hold the multiple elements? Why or how does it manage complexity? Iteration statements going through a list. The results of going through that list, and again, managing complexity. So these 4 categories, I'm going to jump through them one more time here. This is going to be talking about their program code and their video. This section is going to be talking about the PPR1, which is their procedure itself. It may also be talking about PPR2, which is the call to procedure. Then we have errors in testing. When you're running your code, how could it be successful? And you could know you're running your code with checking it with printlns and putting it for parameters in. And then finally, this data and procedural abstraction is going to be focused mainly on lists and checking out lists. I know I've been running really fast. I only have 4 minutes to go here. I hope I didn't miss any questions. Finally, um, students aren't allowed to get help from us. It is the worst task ever. I am born to teach. I am born to help people learn. And for this, I am not allowed to. And it is the height of frustration that I cannot do this, but we really need to resist. Um, my strategy for resisting is to direct them back to shopping lists where I can have a conversation with them, or testing 1, 2, 3 where I can have a conversation with them, or say, go to the docs tab, go to the lessons, and that's what I would go to. So thank you very much for coming out today. Good luck to you and all your students as they go through this. CT shenanigans is what we're definitely going through.
Should
And
get
so I'm going to pass it back to you, Robin.
Thank you. Thank you. We do have one question. Candace said, some students struggle to come up with an idea for the PT. Any ideas on how to assist them?
So one of the strategies I use in assisting them is, since I've been a reader for a lot of years, I just keep a journal basically of what people have turned into me. If you don't happen to have that, then on the course in the course guide on AP is are examples from 2023. I believe there are 13 examples, and they could go and look at those examples. The first one's really good. I think A and B are really good, and C's low, and they can look through those examples for ideas of what they might be inspired by. There's also some examples in CodeHS at the resource hub. And the other thing that they could do is, and this is something that the AP mentions, after you've used testing 1, 2, 3 and shopping list, you can then say to them, based on what AP says, pick something that inspires you. Your sport that you're in, your club that you're in, the musical instrument you play, your babysitting job, something like that. Pick something that already is important to your life and then write a code about it. And if they already have the scaffolding of testing 1, 2, 3 and shopping list, then they can take that inspiration and then build from, extend from there, and make it their own. There, that's what I would go for.
Nice. Thank you. Thank you. Let me see if we have any other questions. Somebody asked about different things you can use to screen record. I think we have that one taken care of. A couple people suggested Loom. We just got another one in Gordon.
I do, excuse me, I also do use one called Screen Pal. Screen Pal. It just changed name from whatever it used to be, Screencastify maybe.
Okay.
But Screen Pal is super easy to use. You can kind of put it right on your screen so you can select exactly what you need to record. Super easy.
Nice.
And web based, so you won't get blocked by any software downloads or anything.
That's always good. Gordon says, I have students who have completed the intermediate computer programming class and their CPT ideas are much more advanced than the examples. How do I best guide them to still be writing the guideline? Oh, sorry, to still be within the guidelines?
You are exactly right. That is very, very difficult. It is a pitfall that I warn my students from at the very beginning of when we start this, and saying, some of you will write beautiful code. It'll be hundreds of lines long. It'll be perfect. There's nothing wrong with it. It does magical, beautiful things. And then I will say, great code. I'm glad you wrote that way. Go back and check. Does this fulfill the guidelines? And it doesn't. And it is heartbreaking. I had it just happen to 2 of my students this year. They write really, really good code, really doing amazing things, and they can't use it. I try to tell them to say, okay, you've got good code. Let's not throw it away. Let's just say to ourselves, how can I put a list in effectively? Because you need one procedure that's going to have parameter, iteration, selection, sequencing, and hopefully that list in there as well. And many of you really strong coders, after being super annoyed, they'll figure out a way. Oh, that's a great answer, Svetlana. Yes.
Nice. Awesome. Any other questions for Eric? We can hang out just a couple minutes. I did throw a bunch of links in the chat. So I did put a link to the workshop survey in the chat if you would be so kind as to fill that out for us and let us know how you liked this webinar. And then also I put in a link to a virtual teacher conference that CodeHS is hosting. It's totally free. Attendees will get a CodeHS Pro trial, a gift card, a digital swag bag, all sorts of things. And that is the virtual teacher conference. The link is in the chat. I'll toss it in there one more time though. And that's on April 13th, and you will want to register for that. There are several sessions that you can choose from. So I think it'll be a super good Saturday to get a lot of good information. And I don't see any other questions for Eric. So I want to thank everyone for coming. We really appreciate it. I know he gave a lot of great information that I hope is helpful for you as you finish up, hopefully the year pretty soon. I know we've got some spring breaks coming up. So thank you again, and we will see you all next time.